Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to our discussion on rebuilding Europe with culture. The question is, where do we stand? This conference is organized by GESAC with the support of Jean-Michel Jarre and the Member of European Parliament, Christian Ehler, and the Federation of European Book Publishers. I'm Shada Islam. I'm an independent EU commentator and analyst based here in Brussels. Now, rebuilding Europe with culture is a bold statement, but it is also a very important one. The Rebuilding Europe study published by EY earlier this year warned that the sector was being devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns that followed. But there was also a message of hope, and that was that the sector, the creative industries and culture would bounce back with the right policies and the right financing. Today, we'll be talking to high-level decision makers from across Europe to talk about how we can rebuild, recover, replan, and rebalance the creative industries and cultural sector. The focus is on reopening, recovery, and rebalancing of Europe's cultural and creative industries. Now, let's remember that culture is one of Europe's most globally competitive sectors. It is also an essential part of our professional and our personal lives. It connects us, it reassures us, it creates a sense of belonging. And of course, during this pandemic, it has really been a source of culture. Culture has been a source of inspiration for all of us. Now, it's been almost a year since the European Union adopted a historic recovery plan for the European Union. But what is the place of culture and creative industries in this once-in-a-lifetime economic policy program? So we're going to kick off this very interesting 2 hours ahead of us with a keynote address by the one and only Jean-Michel Jarre. He is, of course, the godfather of electronic music. He is also a tireless supporter of the cultural sector and the future generation of creators. He's also one of the initiators and hosts of this event. Jean-Michel Jarre, the screen is yours.
Thank you. And I won't be long, just to say that I really congratulate GESAC and the European Commission to be able to set up such a meeting. As we know, of course, rebuilding Europe with culture is an absolute priority, not only for the cultural sector, but we realized with the pandemic that we did 2 things, and the planet did 2 things. One was to go out to get some food, and the other one was to spend time for all of us to listen to music, to read books, and to watch movies or TV series. And if we had to be convinced that culture is an absolute necessity, we all realize that without culture, the past 2 years would have been a total desert and a total despair. So we know that, as you just said, the pandemic shattered the economy of culture, and especially the live performances. For lots of artists, it's the only way to get some revenues. And I must say that author societies played a major role in this period to help and continue to help the most vulnerable artists by finding the means to help in each territory in Europe the most vulnerable artists. But of course, it's not enough. Another congratulations has to be made to Europe, because Europe, by creating exceptional funds to help turn the economy around, has succeeded to keep our continent alive. But actually, at the same time, we know that we all suffered, the whole cultural sector, of a loss of more than 30%, which is of course dramatic for established artists, but it's a catastrophe for beginners and for emerging artists. So rebuilding Europe, what does it mean with culture? It means that culture also, as we know, is not a niche anymore. I think everybody in Europe knows that. I don't know if it's the same situation for the rest of the world. I doubt. But you know, we have to admit that it's 8 times the telecommunication business in terms of jobs. It's 4 times more than in terms of turnover, and we know that the world is looking at Europe. Pandemic at the same time played a major role as an accelerator regarding our relationship, personal relationship, all of us, with digital technology. And I would like to finish by raise one point. You know, everybody is talking about metaverse and all new digital technology linked to the Internet 3.0, the Internet of the future. And at the moment, this is something, again, which is led by American people. I would like to raise something personal very quickly. I did a concert in a virtual reality for the New Year's Eve in a virtual Notre Dame. And we had a big success because we've been followed by more than 75 million people around the world. If I'm saying this, it's not because of myself, but because of the fact that we had to go through an American platform, a US platform, for distribution and to distribute the whole project. And we had to pay this platform for this platform. Tomorrow, it means that if we don't get urgently an autonomy for the European metaverse, we'll be even more slaved to the US technology that we have been so far for Internet for all actors and all actors of culture and beyond. And, you know, we should not forget that Zuckerberg means Mount of Sugar in German. And you know that we know that sugar could be a poison for human beings. So we have to be careful as European people to create urgently our own independence for all the extension of the real world in terms of culture. It's a matter of hundreds of thousand jobs. It's the economy of tomorrow morning for culture, and we need really to gather more than ever all the European countries to get, first of all, our own metaverse, and probably also one of these days an European cloud, because this is really, you know, it's a political decision. You know, if I take the example of Airbus is a European project, and it has a kind of major role in the planet vis-à-vis anybody else. So it has been a political decision. It's the decision of European politics to create our independence in terms of Internet. You know, we are at the origin, European people, of Internet as a concept, and we left it to the US. We should not repeat the same mistake with Internet 3.0, metaverse, VR, AR, and AI ecosystem. And this is really something urgent that would be one of the main ways to save our independence on a cultural point of view, and also to save our economy. Thank you very much. And also, I would like to say that I'm really happy and very interested to hear from the high-level speakers today. And I hope that you will bring hope and confidence to the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jean-Michel Jarre. Thank you for joining us from your studios in Paris and for giving us those very, very important messages at the start of this 2-hour event. Now it's my honor also to present a keynote address by the President of the European Parliament, Mr. David Sassoli, who is also a fervent and invaluable supporter of creators and creativity. And he's provided a foreword for the EY study that we mentioned earlier this year. So the floor now for a recorded message is to Mr. Sassoli.
Buongiorno a tutti, saluto tutti gli ospiti presenti, gli organizzatori che desidero ringraziare per l'invito, per l'opportunità di aprire questa conferenza di alto livello organizzata dal Gruppo Europeo delle Società di Autori e Compositori. Lo sappiamo, la pandemia ha avuto un impatto devastante sulle nostre vite e ha pesantemente danneggiato il settore culturale. Grazie al piano di ripresa europeo siamo riusciti a destinare massicci investimenti anche a settori economici chiave, strategici, riconoscendo il valore che la cultura ha nelle nostre vite e nelle nostre economie. Il nostro ricco e variegato patrimonio culturale è il cemento sul quale si costruisce il nostro comune senso di appartenenza. La cultura è vitale per la coesione delle nostre società, per le nostre democrazie, per le nostre economie. È lo specchio della nostra diversità europea e costituisce i nostri valori, racconta la nostra storia, è parte essenziale della nostra vita e come tale dobbiamo sostenerla. Lo studio EY ha messo in evidenza non solo il peso che la pandemia ha avuto su questo settore, ma anche l'importanza economica e sociale che le industrie culturali e creative hanno nell'Unione Europea e sulla vita dei nostri cittadini. L'industria può essere il punto dal quale ripartire, la chiave, come dice anche il vostro motto, per ricostruire l'Europa. E come Parlamento europeo ci impegneremo a garantire la crescita di un settore che in un mondo sempre più polarizzato aiuta a costruire ponti, a connessioni. Continueremo a chiedere, ad esempio, agli Stati membri di essere più attenti e ambiziosi in un settore trainante della nostra crescita economica e sociale. Ecco perché è importante concentrarsi sui 3 temi che discuterete oggi, riaprire garantendo che le attività culturali possano riprendere in sicurezza, recuperare, dando seguito ai piani e alle politiche nazionali di recupero, riequilibrare, prendendo decisioni adeguate a livello europeo per adattare il settore culturale alle piattaforme tecnologiche. L'indipendenza e la sostenibilità del settore passa anche attraverso una remunerazione adeguata. Per questo abbiamo bisogno di garantire un quadro giuridico europeo che tuteli gli artisti, le loro creazioni, le loro opere, soprattutto in questo periodo in cui soffrono di più l'impatto della crisi. Il patrimonio culturale è la testimonianza diretta della nostra storia, un mezzo per combattere l'odio, il nazionalismo, l'esclusione, favorisce la nostra coesione, rafforza la nostra umanità e dà un senso alla nostra appartenenza. Per questo, come siamo uniti nella diversità, dobbiamo esserlo per ricostruire insieme l'Europa con la cultura.
I'd like to give the floor for another keynote address to European Commissioner Mariya Gabriel, who is responsible for culture as well as innovation, education, youth, and research. Commissioner Gabriel is a great supporter of the creative and cultural sector of Europe, and she has been following the cultural file avidly in the EU Council with EU member states, with members of European Parliament, regions, and local authorities. A big warm welcome to you, Commissioner Gabriel, and the screen is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, dear friends. It is a pleasure to be here at this conference to discuss together with all of you the culture in rebuilding Europe. But let me start by thanking Jean-Michel Jarre. Jean-Michel, your message is always very engaged, very strong, pertinent, and future-oriented. I would like to thank GESAC, the Federation of the European Book Publishers, and the member of the European Parliament, Christian Ehler, for the organization of this high-level conference. Your work to make sure that culture stays front and center in our recovery agenda is truly inspiring. And I must say that I'm very, very happy to see so much familiar faces. Dear friends, the pleasure is to be here united by our wish to act for culture, not only to discuss about the importance of culture. So my first message, I think and I believe that we should continue to join forces, we, the European institutions, the national governments, the artistic sector, to achieve these 2 objectives: supporting culture through the economic recovery and leveraging culture for recovery. And fulfilling these 2 objectives are paramount for our success. And let me expose you how Europe can support these aims and stays true to the creativity sector and to its citizens who are so passionate about culture. Well, first, and that was said at the beginning of this conference, culture took a big hit with the pandemic. The cultural and creative sectors suffered substantial revenue losses, as the GESAC study well illustrated, with an estimation of over 30% lost revenues. This is not a small bump in the road. Before the pandemic hit, the cultural and creative sectors represented about 4.4% of our European GDP. We are talking about nearly 8 million jobs. But their importance, it's not merely economical. We rely on them for a sense of identity, an identity based on values that bring us together with our diversities and keep us resilient. And it is remarkable to see how the sector adapted to circumstances and how they found new ways of engaging with digital audiences. We all enjoyed seeing artists performing live from their home studios, releasing new songs or short movies, organizing online entertainment programs, making us laugh, dream, and reflect. Artists never quit contributing to our future. Now, what Europe did until now for them? First, remember, we mobilized state aid support to culture under REACT-EU, and we created the platform Creative Unite for the sector and by the sector. Second, what is really important is that we managed to increase the funds for culture across Creative Europe program, Horizon Europe program. For the first time, there will be a cluster dedicated to culture and creativity with a budget of 2 billion. And we have a new community of innovation and communication with the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. By the way, the first calls are open since 26th of October. So now what is really important is to seize the momentum and to see how with this increased budget, we can better achieve our goals. Third element, and I think that is so important, is that together with the European Parliament, remember, we called our member states to dedicate 2% of the resilience and recovery facility plans to culture. And dear friends, I can share with you our first analysis. We did it. We estimate more than 2% at European level. That means more or less 9 billion euros. So today, for me, the question is that we are seeing the culture as becoming a crossroads, receiving funds from several and diverse sources. That is great news because it means greater support for culture. But it can be difficult to manage, especially for smaller organizations. And that is precisely why last week I launched the new Culture EU funding tool and guide. And this is a user-friendly, interactive online tool featuring all European funding opportunities for stakeholders working in the cultural and creative sectors. That was demanded by the sector for many years now, and in only a few months, now we have this tool at our disposal. In one sentence, over 75 funding opportunities are only 3 clicks away. The interactive online tool can direct any European cultural entity to the most appropriate source of European support. And this data will be available in all European languages as of early 2022. And this will support cultural players in their invaluable role for the post-pandemic world. I invite you to test this tool and to spread the news. I would like here also to bring to your attention maybe the importance of 2 elements in Creative Europe program, because it's very good now that we have this 60% of increase for the budget of Creative Europe program for the next period in comparison with the previous one. But there is 2 important and I think relevant for the sector instruments. Sorry. The first one is the increase of the support of the program for individual artists and creative professionals to be able to cross border and reach new audiences. And the second, that is the targeted support to specific sectors. And the European Parliament knows what I'm talking about, especially about Music Moves Europe initiative. But okay, funding and access to funding is a solid base. What we need now? We need fully to unlock the potential of the creative and cultural ecosystem, and with creativity to propose solutions to the societal challenges we face today. That's what I'm calling revolutionizing culture for recovery. I believe that we need the creativity and the ingenuity of the artists, of the entire cultural and creative sectors to succeed in finding the answers to address these challenges. Because recovery is not just tied to financial support. Culture has always motivated and engaged communities to imagine a different future. Culture has always accompanied major progress in our societies. And at the European Commission, we recognize a true mission for culture in finding tomorrow's answers to today's problems. This is what guided us to launch the new European Bauhaus. Because artists and creators innovate every day, we know that they will help transforming sectors such as housing, construction, or textiles to become more climate neutral. What we are doing with the new European Bauhaus is to accelerate the movement that has already emerged, to support the innovative creators wherever they are in the European Union. And you know, many artists, cultural and creative communities, please spread the word. We want to support them in transforming our lives. We need to cooperate more. We need to link the different ecosystems. We need simply to support our talents. And we are looking forward to see which beauties they are preparing for all of us. So, dear friends, let me conclude by underlining the momentum we have amassed for culture. We have the support of member states, especially through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. We have fresh new European programs launched this year with a great deal of promise for the sectors. We have the support of citizens across the European Union who relied so dearly on culture to get them through confinement. We have everything going for us. And today's event is also an opportunity for us to praise the creators. The inspiration they provide, continue to provide, is fundamental to our collective relief and sense of connection. A lot of this was made possible, and that was said by Jean-Michel, with the new digital means. This only confirms the relevance of our new copyright rules. And you know me very well, I will always continue to say how important it is for our member states to act on this issue. Because with the copyright rules, we set a standard for the use of creative content online, and it's really time for our member states to join act towards. So regarding this and on the rest of your debates, I can only wish us all a very fruitful debate and reflection on how we can better work to reopen and recover from this pandemic. But my sincere wish is to continue together with all of you, really to transform the beautiful words and the beauty of the work of our creators into something that is tangible, operational, and beneficial, after all, not only for all our cultural and creative sectors, for us as Europe, but for every one of us as citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner Gabriel, for those inspiring words, asking us to join forces and also announcing quite a few new initiatives and funding tools ahead. So thank you very much indeed for that. Now we'll start our first panel. And as I said to you, it's about reopening and the start of the recovery. We have with us, joining us online, Rafal Trzaskowski. He's Mayor of Warsaw, Poland, one of Europe's biggest capital cities. And he has been Civic Platform's candidate for the Polish presidency as well. So welcome, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. Also joining us is Olivier Toth. He is CEO of Rafal Festival from Luxembourg since its opening in 2005. In September this year, he was elected as president of the European Arenas Association, becoming the voice of the live event industry in its conversation with EU institutions. Thank you very much for joining us, Olivier, from Luxembourg. Sonia Draga, joining us also, is one of the best-known book publishers from Poland. Since September last year, Sonia is the president of the Polish Book Chamber, representing the entire Polish publishing sector. Welcome as well, Sonia. And joining us also is Member of European Parliament, Iban Garcia del Blanco. He's Spanish, specializing in cultural management and a member of the Cultural and Creators Friendship Group in the European Parliament. So I'm going to kick off with you, Mayor Trzaskowski, and tell us a little bit about the impact of the closures and restrictions on the cultural activities that happened in Warsaw. What was it like and what is it like now? Screen is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Bon après-midi. Premièrement, Jean-Michel Jarre, merci beaucoup pour votre initiative. Énergie, ça c'est vraiment important. Thank you very much. Guys, it is wonderful to talk to you from Warsaw, a city of culture, and a city in which we try to manage, two different traditions, because one is obviously the tradition which comes from our history, and we're pretty strong when it comes to museums, when it comes to Chopin, when it comes to contemporary music festivals, and so on and so forth. But now Warsaw at the same time is one of the most vibrant and dynamic cities when it comes to culture in its new guises, when it comes to independent culture, when it comes to independent theaters, when it comes to people doing music in cafes and clubs, when it comes to publishers of all kinds of books. This is a place to be, and it's changing and it's incredibly dynamic. And of course, I as a mayor of the city, I'm there to support the creative sector. I can tell you one little anecdote. When I was running for president of Poland, they told me never take pictures in front of so many books because people might think that you're too elitist. And I told them, that's who I am, so forget about it. And if politicians are actually showing that reading books is good, then it's for the benefit of us all. And of course, during the pandemic, the situation was tricky at the beginning because we thought, as Jean-Michel said correctly, that we have a bit more time to read, a bit more time to listen to music, and a bit more time to engage. But of course, the creative sector was being punished by the epidemic. And of course, the theaters were closed. There were no concerts organized, and the revenue was going down. And the question was, what can we do about it? We've created in Warsaw a special VOD platform in order to support culture in our city. I'm responsible for 18 theaters. I'm responsible for more than 20 museums. And of course, we saw revenues going down and people out of their jobs. So we did whatever we could in order to support the whole sector. And of course, it helped a bit. But it didn't take all the problems away. Now, of course, the sectors are slowly opening, but since the fourth wave is coming, we are still in this very difficult position. And when I talk to my friends all around Warsaw, I know that revenues go down by 75%, and the situation is quite difficult. And the most important thing is that we do not even know how to plan the future, because some of our governments are not very responsible. They do not share this strategy. They're trying to surprise us with decisions from day to day, and we have to implement them. And it's very difficult to organize life in such circumstances. But there's quite a lot we can do together. And at the end of my intervention, I would like to share 3 or 4 recipes for the future with you, because that's what we should be focusing on. First of all, the recovery program, the Bauhaus that Commissioner Gabriel was talking about. There are immense possibilities to invest EU money wisely in order to rejuvenate the creative sector. And of course, the role of the creative sector in Europe's GDP is very important, but more importantly, in promoting our DNA and actually showing the world who we really are. So the money's there, and the question is to use it wisely. Maybe to use it directly with the artists themselves, directly with the local governments and cities who know how to spend money, in order so that we can have an immediate effect of galvanizing the whole sector, because we need you guys back, and we need to organize our cities and prepare for the future, which needs to be vibrant. Secondly, we have to keep implementing the copyright directive in the digital single market, because as Jean-Michel Jarre has started the discussion at the beginning, we need the intermediaries to start paying the European artists. We need the licensing agreements to be respected. And the tools are there. It's just a question of using them wisely. And finally, thirdly, we need to use the DSM also to support the reliable media, because if we don't do that, we are going to have more and more polarization, less and less professionalism in the media. And if we want, the information to be spread in a free and open way, we need to support the sector in this field as well. And yes, it is true. At the end of the day, it is only us, the European Union, who can regulate the sector of social media and regulate the sector of digital media in a way which is going to benefit Europeans, which is going to benefit our artists, and which is not going to leave everything in the hands of the almighty American companies. So we got to do it together, guys, because otherwise our cities are going to be really glum. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to develop creatively, and that's exactly what we want to do. And finally, guys, there is an active role for government of all levels. So if you hear as artists that culture should do well by itself, keep on pushing, because pressure is incredibly important on your national government, on the European Union institutions, and of course on us as well, your mayors. At the end of the day, we're there elected to serve you, and you make our life worthwhile. Thank you very much, and have a fruitful discussion.
Mayor Trzaskowski, I have to say some very good advice on how to spend the money, and also the importance of mayors in trying to rejuvenate cities after this pandemic, really. But still pointing out it's still difficult and uncertainties lie ahead. Thank you very much, Rafal, indeed. Olivier, I'm going to turn to you now. You manage one of the biggest concert venues in Luxembourg. So give us some of your insights on how reopening could be an essential part of recovery plans. What are your views on this recovery and reopening that we're talking about now?
Thank you. And dear colleagues, members of the European Parliament, dear commissioners, dear ministers, thank you for organizing the event, to the two organizers, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the live entertainment sector. I would call it the real deal, if you like. We've been talking and hearing a lot about digital, and that's true, and it's really important. At the same time, it's really important, and we see it every day when we can operate in our venues, how strong the ties and how emotional the ties are between an artist on stage and their audience in front of them. What we've lost by being shut down is catastrophic. We know through several studies that we've led in our industry and throughout our membership that there were about 80% less concerts in 2020 and in 2021 compared to 2019. The arenas, for us, this means hundreds of thousands of jobs and lives that have been impacted by this. It has been mentioned by Commissioner Gabriel, the huge number of jobs that are involved in our industry. And as a hub in the middle of all the stakeholders, from the audience to the artists to everybody working behind the scenes to make shows happen, this has affected so many people. Since the beginning, with the European Arenas Association and the Arena Resilience Alliance, we have done our part for the community. We have chosen to have a proactive approach. We've hosted testing and vaccination centers in our arenas. We've hosted food banks, just to name a few of the initiatives. And we feel that we've contributed sometimes even more than other industries could have done. We've also held scientifically monitored pilot and test events, which were really important to us, and which should prove that we know how to host safe events. One example is the poster in my background, Because Music Matters, which was an initiative that we took at the Rock Hall in February this year. But I also like to name Barcelona at the Palau Sant Jordi and Accor Arena in Paris, amongst many others. We wanted to be part of the solution. And we did it on our own because we took the lead. And despite being forced to shut down without particular proof of certain danger, which means that there was no study that had shown overinfection or increased risk when wearing face masks or being admitted only with a negative test, and adjusting all the other parameters that you can do inside a venue would increase risk for the audience and the artists. And we see today, we're staying shut longer than any other industry. Some of us have opened since summer. Some of us are still shut down 100% in some of the countries. We have used the last 18 months to do advocacy. Not only have we done our part, but we also initiated awareness raising for our sector through letters, joint letters, through events, studies, data collection, and through public webinars with policymakers. Events like this one are really essential, and they prove that there's an echo. It's a good sign. It proves that the issue of well-being is indeed a policy issue that can be addressed at European level. What has been done is very important, and some has already been mentioned. We've had the European Commission move on issuing guidelines for reopening the cultural sector. We also have seen the European Parliament and Commission moving on committing the 2% for culture in recovery budgets, and we've heard before. This is good. It proves that there is a real need for coordination. But coordination measures need to be implemented by all member states, because without that, no matter how much money you throw at the problem, you won't fix it. You won't fix anything for an industry like ours, the live entertainment industry, which depends on the openness of borders and of the freedom of movement and stable guidelines for holding public events. And we might address this topic a little bit later again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you very much. Actually, both you and Rafal have actually answered the second question as well, in a sense, and you've just, Olivier, talked about the best practices as well. So I'm going to ask the two panelists who are coming in now, Sonia Draga and Iban Garcia del Blanco, to also sort of compress their second answers into the first one as well, because we are running short of time, and everything you're saying is so essentially important. So Sonia, let me ask you the two questions together, really. One is, we have talked about books and online publishing. Of course, that's been great, and we've all been sort of, reading while we were stuck in our homes, etc. But what has it meant for you as a publisher of Polish books in Polish? Now you're representing the entire sector in Poland, actually. And what advice would you give, Sonia, for a more sustainable recovery for the cultural sector to all of us watching?
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the chance to voice the problems of the publishing sector in Europe. If the book sector in Europe has been less affected than some, the picture is very different according to each country. Like in my own country, in Poland, we haven't actually lost on the general turnover, but we've lost on net revenues, as most of the books have been sold online with big discounts. There were countries who lost even 20%, while some Nordic countries have had better results, and others have barely broken even. But when you look closer at the situation, even in countries where the revenues have increased, this has been done at the expenses of cultural diversity. And although the independent bookstores remained open all the time, the big chains suffered as the shopping malls, where the majority of the stores are located, were closed during several periods of lockdowns. Our industry operates without any law, like a fixed price law that is existing in some countries of Europe. And that law could protect small independent bookshops and in the small businesses in general. So they couldn't effectively fight strong and aggressive competition from the online stores. And for the past 2 years, we have witnessed the shutdown of about 300 bookstores in Poland, and we may expect more closures in the coming month. And as a result, mostly the books of known authors were selling. And it has been more and more difficult to promote and sell unknown authors, debuts, and sophisticated literature. Some countries have decided that books were an essential product and that bookshops like Pharmacy for the Soul have remained open. But the lack of physical book fairs made it tougher to introduce new books and new ideas to the readers. Online meetings made it possible in some cases to keep contacts between authors, publishers, and readers, but they haven't been able to replace the real events. We were lucky to have the chance to take part in some events that were organized in Poland from June this year, and we saw how people were eager to come despite the restrictions, how much they enjoyed the real meetings with the authors, and how important were the real B2B meetings within the publishing industry. But not all the industry players acted the same, thinking wrongly that the pandemic time showed we could live now only with online activities. That's why the fair organizations might still need the support to rebuild the proper position of the publishing markets. And within the financial support, some countries have helped the cultural industries, some have not. It is clear that if a country is using the resilience and the recovery fund to support its cultural industries and sectors to overcome the crisis, it will help especially smaller structures to continue publishing books and therefore contribute to cultural diversity. And the Polish companies within the Polish publishing industries could use some grants that were given to all the companies during the first lockdown, but later on, since the sales of books were not officially limited, although conducted through other sales channels, most of the industry subjects were left without any support. And only recently, there was a new governmental program open to support independent bookstores, but due to very low budget, it is just a drop in the bucket, so to say. We also have to mention problems at the level of book printing. The broken chain of supplies tackled also the publishing industry, making it more expensive to print the book, resulting in huge delays in printing services and uncertain situation. Publishers have to raise the retail prices of the books without knowing the real and final rise of the production cost, higher cost of paper, limitation of the paper diversity, functional problems of the printing companies who can't meet tough demands from the paper supply companies, rise of energy costs. All that shows that the future of publishing looks fragile and may become turbulent. And what will be my suggestion for a more sustainable recovery of cultural sector in the publishing area? I think we all need money and conjunctural and structural measures and good legislative framework. Money in terms of grants for translators, authors, especially authors and books that are debuts and representing the niche but highly valuable sector. Legislation in terms of protecting the copyright of authors and rights of the publishers. Structural, I think national reading promotion campaigns should be organized, and we all should make sure that the cultural budget is sufficient to guarantee true cultural policy. And I think we should also push the increase of the budget of the collectivities like schools and libraries to buy books, and ideally it would be done through the bookstores. We have to have in mind that to ensure the diversity in books representing ideas from various cultures, we need diverse distribution channels with independent bookstores. Thus, we need governmental programs to keep those indies alive. Also, vouchers for young people to acquire cultural products, tax deductions for the books purchases could be a good financial proposals. Why, just to summarize my speech, why the governments should support the publishing industry? Because we should not forget that reading books is fundamental to any education. Reading develops creative thinking, curiosity, analytical skills, cause and effect relationship, ability to focus. And being fundamental to innovation and creativity, reading ensures innovative entrepreneurship and strong economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia, talking to us about the challenges you face in Poland in the publishing industry, but also highlighting just how important government support is going to be also as we come out of this pandemic, hopefully. Thank you very much indeed. Let me turn now to Iban Garcia del Blanco and also ask you the same question. I mean, what has been the Spanish experience as you come out of this pandemic? What are the kinds of structural changes that you are looking for?
Hello, hello everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real honor to be here. Let me start with a quote by the great Spanish poet Federico García Lorca. I try to translate it properly, but it is said something like, when someone asked him what he would need if he were hungry, he replied, "Do not give me bread, give me half a bread and half a book." So he understood that culture is the nurture of our soul. Everything has been told on how this pandemic has make this sector to suffer in these 2 years. I prefer to focus on the reopening of the cultural and cultural recovery. This was and still the main concern: how to save culture and how to make culture safe. The first measures were how to include the cultural industries and cultural workers in the national plans and recovery tools to help them to pass the most dramatic effects of the lockdown. This effort implied the recognition of special characteristics of the cultural and creative sector. Cultural organizations are often subject to the specificities on their business status, and cultural workers are often subject of intermittency and precariousness in their working conditions. In Spain, we had to adapt our legislation to include into the social health programs the creators, musicians, cultural workers, artists, authors, and performers, but also the technicians that are an essential part of the sector. The second step was to increase investment in the sector to help its recovery, because we understood that the most important is to support them also in the long term. For example, in Spain, we launched a plan to create an audiovisual hub. This plan will boost the audiovisual sector with a special investment of more than 1,600 million euros for the period 2021 to 2025. Its goal is to support the audiovisual sector, building links within Europe, but also with the Mediterranean neighborhood and Latin America, just taking advantage of our special position in this way from Spain. We share the conviction that culture is essential everywhere and at every time. Moreover, when we face new waves, new measures might be needed, and the cultural sector feels against the threat of a new lockdown. I believe it is completely unfair. We know the solution is vaccination, and we have to protect our cultural roots. This is why I found so important the campaign launched by the Ministry of Culture in Spain. La cultura segura, culture is safe. Safe culture, hashtag cultura segura. This campaign provides theaters and venues, as well as the public, with a much needed relief in these exceptionally difficult times, allowing cultural events to take place in safety. The Spanish experience working together, the culture and the health administration, proved that cultural activities are not focus of contagion as long as they respect the protocols in place. This is by no means a request of relax, of course. Protocols and expertise to resume cultural activities safely already exist. Efforts to ensure that the teams work and rehearse safely to guide streams of visitors and public and to keep a safe distance in theaters and venues are already in place. Culture is safe is the motto of the Spanish campaign, I said. We need now more than ever to safeguard our cultural roots, and I truly believe the Spanish experience is a good example of this.
Thank you very much indeed, Garcia del Blanco. Just to say to all panelists who have joined, thank you so much for your inspirational discussions, exchange of best practices, and also the recommendations you are making. I think this is going to be very important for GESAC and for the entire sector as we move, hopefully, out of this pandemic and into a new era where we do have a revival, a very, very, I would say, dynamic revival of the cultural sector that has been such a comfort and is so important to us personally, but also the economies of Europe. Thank you indeed to all four of you for joining us. Okay, we're going to kick off with the panel without the recorded message at this stage, no problem at all. So to turn to you, Member of European Parliament, Mr. Christian Ehler, as I said, lovely to have you here. And I was just wondering if you could give us your views on what makes the CCI sector, the creative and cultural industry sector, so unique for Europe, and what does this sector need from Europe at this time? We've heard impressions from a number of panelists, but let's hear your personal views on this. You need to pick up your microphone.
Thank you very much. I mean, I don't want to bluntly start with the figures, but as the Commissioner had been saying, the creative industry in Europe had been the white elephant in the room of the European economy, because we had been seeing that, sometimes rightly so, as the cultural dimension of that sector. But speaking it out bluntly, it's 5% of the European GDP. So we're talking about a sector which is bigger than the automotive industry or the chemical industry. And we don't want to commercialize the idea about the creative industry, but I think we should proudly say we're here and we have the same rights as other industry to be present, to fight for our interest and get the needed political background to succeed. The second dimension is, I mean, this is very close to our heart. I might be a guy with a suit and a tie, and you might be in the kind of alienating experience. But what I represent, the European Parliament, there's always the question, what is the basis of Europe? And if you look back before we get to any kind of political idea about the political Europe, there was the idea of Europe with the creators, with the artists. That ranges back to the Renaissance, to the times of Enlightenment. So if you want to root Europe somehow, you might find the deepest roots, you might find the root of Europe in this united, diverse, but still somehow connected creative Europe. And so it is the essence of the European idea in many ways. And it had been described in the treaties. It's one of the few points where the treaties get somehow poetic. I mean, this is a relatively humble kind of technical agreement. But when it comes to culture, it describes it in an almost poetic way, as long as politicians and constitution can describe it in a poetic way. But you see that there is emotion related to that. And then there's a third aspect, and this is not well understood because we are thinking in silos. We're living a time of transformation, of transformative challenges, may it be by digitalization, may it be by the climate change. And what culture had been doing is, it is the essence of transformation. It's the reflecting, the societal reflecting of changing times. And it is the needed inspiration to transfer technology, to transfer political or ecological ambitions to something which is not a dystopia, where we fear something, the end of the world, or the end of the world we know, because now we are going the digital world. It can transform something into a positive vision. It can manage to reflect that in broader societies where politics has, if you're honest, a limit outreach, but people see societal changes, general changes in the society reflected by artists, by arts, by design, by fashion. And so we desperately need the creative sector for the transformative challenges we are looking ahead.
You sounded poetic as well, I have to say, when you talked about it, and there was a certain gleam in your eye, which shows obviously that you have a very personal attachment to this. Can you just very, very briefly tell us about this personal attachment? What draws you so strongly to this sector?
I mean, we all look, if you're over 50, and me being a Christian Democrat, a little bit alienating to the rest of the world, and we are well aware, but we didn't start like that. And I'm coming from a theater family. My parents had been theater authors, and I know both of on the one hand, the excitement, but also when I was young, my father was calling the theater, and when the audience was full, we would go for dinner. And if the audience had been empty, it was a long evening and I get a butter bread. So in a way, there is a personal affection, but this is just me. But I think still, if you look underneath the surface of suits and political behavior and this kind of static way to express themselves, you find in a lot of my colleagues in the European Parliament, this link that we are dead proud that Jean-Michel Jarre is talking. We had been jumping up and down in concerts when we were younger. Now we look a little bit different, but still you find in every colleague this link, this root to culture, if you talk to him about rock music, about lyrics, or about design or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. You talked about politicians, and let me turn now to Adonis Georgiadis as well, Mr. Minister. Okay, I've been just told by my colleagues here that Mr. Georgiadis has not been able to join us for the moment. So I'm going to take the conversation now to Francesca Trainini. Francesca, are you there online?
I am. Good afternoon.
Wonderful to hear you. I'm going to see you there you are. Lovely to see you as well. So tell us about a little bit, Francesca, about the three issues that are important to you as we discuss and we enter into a conversation on the recovery of the creative and cultural sector.
Yes, thank you, and with pleasure. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to actually be discussing this with such a great panel. And thank you to Mr. Ehler, because he's just made a very good point that we all have a link to culture and we all enjoy culture. And so we are doubly interested and invested in making sure that it survives this crisis. As to your question, I think the 3 points that we need to be absolutely clear about at this moment are, first of all, the increasing of the EU budget dedicated to culture. We have heard Commissioner Gabriel earlier on mention an increase, well, actually a 2% average across Europe investment into cultural sector. And this is a very, very welcome item of news, because we come from another very tough year for all of our members and musicians, for labels and music publishers. So the EU program like Horizon Europe and others of the kind have been very important for our recovery. We're very grateful for this, for the work that people, MEP like Mr. Ehler and Ms. Melbart and Ms. Verheyen, who we will see later, that they played a key role on actually getting, these funds across to us. These are all very good steps in the right direction, but we need a lot more help also from member states to solve our sector, the problems of our sectors. The second item, in my opinion, is the allocation of sufficient amounts for culture at national levels. I touched earlier on the fact that I was very impressed by the fact that Commissioner Gabriel told us about the 2% average across member states. This will be extremely useful, because we have been resilient. Labels and artists have managed to really survive through the crisis, but we need government to help in any possible way for a little while yet. As we said, there are closure, reopenings. The landscape is different everywhere you look, and it's difficult everywhere. We noted that in France and Germany, there have been somewhat good examples of help from the government in this respect. In Italy, we are working together with the government, with the undersecretaries for culture, to bring together, to put together a system of investment that will be wise. I like that idea of actually investing these resources wisely and with the future in mind. So member states need to support us and to keep an eye on culture, so that it doesn't actually succumb to this further challenge that we have ahead of us. And lastly, but not least importantly, a very strong copyright framework. We're happy that we have a copyright directive now in place in many member states, and mostly, I must say, with a good adherence to what was the intention of the Parliament. But we need to make sure that there aren't any other influences that take away from what we actually achieved. And I'm thinking of the Digital Services Act that mustn't cut across what we actually achieved in the Copyright Directive.
Very much, Francesca. So let me turn to Mr. Ehler, who's here with me, and get some of your comments on the very important recommendations that Francesca has made, including on the future of the, of the digital services and all the rest of it. So Let's get some reaction from you.
I mean, first of all, I think what happened over the last year, thanks to the effort of GESAC, but also a lot of artists, that there was a certain reconciliation, I wouldn't say between politics and the creators, but democracy and creators. You had been using the European Parliament at that agora, that platform it was meant for. It's not a technical institution for laws. It's actually the place where Europe is going to discuss about its future. And you brought culture back to democracy in a way. And that had been super successful. I mean, we are praising us, and I'm part of that game, obviously, that we raised the budget in an unforeseen way, be it in the research budget, be in the recovery fund. But what was more important is that you made us, and by that the European societies, understood about the importance of the creative sector. And you did fight, and you had been successful, and you had been kicking asses. And I will remember when GESAC brought one another author, and he was looking at me stubbornly and saying, I don't know whether your fuckers are going to do something for us. And I said, yeah, we might be fuckers, but we want to do something for you. So what's important is that we brought back culture back to the center of the political and democratic dispute in Europe. Not so easy on copyright. It was an eternal battle, and we had to learn a lot. That, for example, we had been attacked in a way not comparable to the Huns or Nazi Germany in the 20th century by the American platforms. I mean, this is really, that did try to cut the essence of creative life, because if you cut the income string, this is going to die. And this is a very robust business, usually not subsidized. We had to understand that we are really talking about the income, and others want to take the income away and accumulate it by that an amount of money which make them even able then to buy content instead of to pay for content. And I think what you had been doing is you did win the fight. And it was a difficult one, because we had been perceiving us as the good ones, you know, but we had been attacked by American platforms and trying to manipulate the discussion where consumers and 14-year-olds were brought in against actually the creative industry, which had been before their customers, their fans, and their lovers. And so I think what you did in essential was that you made clear over the last few years what is your importance for the European societies. And then it comes now that on the one hand, we are in the situation that we have to care about recovery. But I would like to look a little bit ahead, and what you had been doing is also, you showed us your importance, and we better understood the importance of the creative industry also for the challenges ahead. And I really have to salute you, because yes, we are presenting the money we are going to allocate, the programs, the platforms, a better understanding about the interaction between the sector and politics, but it's your success. We just understood, which is not often the case, but we understood, and I think that had been a game changer over the last few years.
So learning curve for politicians at the parliament. Mr. Ehler, do stay with us. We're going to listen now to the speech by the Slovenian Minister of Finance, and then I just take a minute or two of your time to get a few reactions, and then we'll move on to the third panel. So let's listen to Andres Cercel.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank the organizers for organizing this event and inviting me to speak here today. Due to the circumstances that have been lasting for way too long now, we cannot meet in person. Nonetheless, I am convinced that interesting discussions will take place and the valuable information will be shared. Let me start by making a few points on the latest actions we were engaged in as the presiding country to the EU Council. Slovenia took over the presidency in the midst of pandemic and economic downturn. Therefore, the main priority of our presidency was the recovery and exit from the crisis. I believe that the measures we took at the EU level draw us to the rebound that we can see today. The measures were robust, efficient, and decisive. We learned that have to be quick in making strong decisions. I also believe that looking into the future, we have to have the answers before the questions even arise. But speaking of the future, we have to be aware of the opportunities that it brings. We achieved a historical agreement on the Next Generation EU, which represents a plan for enhancing the EU's recovery. In light of that, the EU member states prepared their own plans. Individual member states knew best on which areas to focus and where the results of investments and reforms will be most efficient. The countries, with a detailed preparation of their plans, played a key role in restarting growth and making Europe fit for the future. If I may add at this point, during our presidency, already 22 national recovery plans were adopted. This enabled countries to request for pre-financing for the recovery and resilience facility and begin with the planned investments and reforms. The member states of the EU agreed the recovery is the first goal, but by embracing green transition and digital transformation that will improve EU's position on the global stage, we also agreed that the second goal is building back a stronger, more innovative and more competitive Europe. It seems that current times are speaking in favor of changing the EU for the better. And I'm speaking of recovery and our future. I cannot go without mentioning creativity. I believe that creativity is the most important human resource of all. Without creativity, there would be no progress, and we would be caught repeating the same patterns without any improvements that could change our lives for the better. Culture and cultural heritage play an important role when planning measures for the future. Here I would like to make 3 points. First, the cultural dimension of the green transition should be considered. The cultural world, with its traditional knowledge and skills, can be used to further expand on mitigation and adaptation practices to climate change. It can contribute to achieving the ambitious objectives of the European Green Deal. Second, the COVID outbreak has showed the critical importance of digital technology and also digital access to cultural heritage. Europe already plays a leading role in digital cultural heritage. It also has the potential to lead with new technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning based on humanistic and ethical principles. During the pandemic, many cultural events were also brought to us by the digital technologies. Of course, it is not the same, but we probably all agree that any access to culture is still better than none. Third, in these times of health emergencies, culture plays an important role of the physical and mental well-being of every individual and our societies as a whole. Therefore, investing in culture means investing in public health, well-being, and improving the quality of people's lives. However, to provide best conditions for culture and cultural activities also in the future, we must make sure that we provide foundations for resilience of the society that we live in. So let me return to more operational aspects. The tools to reach the set goals in our strategic documents are the national recovery and resilience plans. Even though there has not been a specific percentage set to be spent for culture, many member states have included cultural sector in their plans. For example, the Slovenian Recovery and Resilience Plan includes the preservation of cultural heritage and comprehensive revitalization and modernization of public cultural infrastructure. The strengthening the potential of culture and heritage are the main drivers of acceleration of economic and tourism recovery and also encourage sustainable development. In my opinion, we are now standing at the crossroads. Individual countries, Europe, and the world. We need to find a sustainable balance between ecological, economic, and social concerns. We have to be aware that we have many opportunities that can lead to improvement at our disposal. We have to do our best to choose the path that leads in the direction of improvement when moving forward from that crossroads. Let me conclude with the wise words of Mahatma Gandhi, who said that a nation's culture resides in the hearts and in the soul of its people. And this is more than true also for Europe. Culture, creativity, and artistic freedom are indeed the heart of the European way of life. Europe is a cultural powerhouse which needs its creative and cultural sectors to prosper, and this is what we have to keep in mind when supporting the recovery and securing more resilient Europe for the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Of course, Slovenia now in the EU presidency chair. So, Mr. Ehler, before we end this session, the minister there talking about the cultural dimension of the Green Deal, of the digital transformation, of the sustainable development goals, and much more indeed. So everything in the end boils down to one thing. There is a cultural dimension.
Yes, I mean, obviously, as I said, I truly believe if we are not able to, in terms of CO2 reduction or climate change, for example, I truly believe if we don't stay away from a dystopia, which is driving a society, to an utopia, we're not going to succeed. You can't live out of fear. And I think culture and creativity turns things into something positive. And so it's decisive from my point of view. It's even technology-wise decisive. You have a lot of technologies, but you bind that together, it transforms to something which brings society forward, makes it attractive for consumers, but attractive for societies. So this transformative ability of creativity is a unique selling point of Europe. There is what the Americans might have the technology, but why are they challenging the creative industry in Europe so much? Because simply they see that there is something they don't have, and you hardly can buy with money, although they do try. And if I may say so, what's going to happen, what should happen right now is that we get a little bit more risky, more innovative, more curious, as we had been doing before. So what I mean is also to some extent the creators. I mean, we had this kind of, to some extent, skepticism, for example, in the creative world about technology. But we all know that digitalization is driving these sectors. Yes. I mean, it's not just the recovery. I mean, we are also, the creative sector is part of societal technology changes.
Right.
And I think that we should, what is positive, to say something also positive about the crisis, is it led to a more cross-sectoral cooperation between the sectors. I mean, we had been stipulating, for example, for the book industry, this kind of looking for digitalization potential, this crossover to other media, to other creative sectors. And what we should do, and I think it's important about our societal perception of these changes, technology changes, we should involve creativity at the very beginning. So we should create labs where we offer creators and creative people access to technology, because they can think or rethink or do it differently. And we're going to see that. I mean, we're going not to see that cotton is not going to be the basis of our clothing, but what will be the basis of our clothing? No new materials, but new attractivity, but also the merge perhaps with health issue, with digital issue. And I think creators can do that, and we have to be much more risk-driven. So we want also industry to engage much more with creators. And if you look back to the Renaissance, you had been seeing that it had been creativity driving technology development or society changes, and not the other way around. It's not an attribute to a technology. It develops the technologies to something which is accepted by society, where society is interested in, and leads also to create opportunities for citizens to participate in that discussion about this changing society.
Right.
And so the potential is almost universe. And I think we should come now from this, okay, we understood, okay, we had a hard fight on copyright, but we didn't kill you, to this, how on earth do we get out of the recovery? But then to this, we think that the creativity and the creative sector will be the major contribution to master the challenges which are lying ahead in digitalization and in terms of climate change. And I think that is something we should understood better, communicate to citizens, and not keep it in this silo that we're saying, okay, now we spend more money on culture and we are a little bit better than before. We have to put that in the center of our
and connect the
consideration.
dots, as you're saying, and connect the dots. Thank you very much, Mr. Ehler. I just wonder, Francesca, because you're online still, aren't you? Just very, very quickly, 30 seconds. What would be your final word?
My final word would be to remind everyone that artists and labels have been working very hard in the last 2 years. And the way out of this, in the original question I had, a light at the end of the tunnel, yes or no? Yes, there is. We'll continue to work very hard. We'll continue to put culture at the center of our work. And we'll bear in mind what Mr. Ehler has just said, i.e. that culture is a driving force for Europe. And that's what's going to be driving us as well.
Together, let's rebuild Europe with culture.
Rebuilding Europe with culture. Where do we stand? Join to find out what they say.
Elle est surtout indispensable pour notre société car elle incarne nos valeurs de diversité, d'unité et de démocratie.
Together, let's rebuild Europe with culture.
We need the European and national decision makers to all be on the same page.
If we are to preserve culture, we must continue to create, to support and sustain.
Culture is essential for our people's well-being and for the future generations of Europeans.
Together, let's rebuild Europe with culture.
C'est tous ensemble, reconstruisons l'Europe par la culture.
Soyons mobilisés pour que le domaine de la culture ne soit pas sacrifié plus que ça n'a été le cas ces 2 dernières années.
We are optimistic that this crisis, like many others, eventually has to come to its end.
Welcome back for the third panel, which is on rebalance, and it's about the new rules of engagement in the European digital market. Joining me online and on stage here in Brussels, first of all, let me introduce Véronique de Bros. Thank you for being here, Véronique, General Manager, GESAC, and also GESAC and herself have played a very key role in the adoption of the famous Copyright Directive of 2019. Véronique is joining me on stage. Thanks for your company, Véronique. Joining online is Member of European Parliament Sabine Verheyen from Germany, who was elected as chair of the European Parliament's Committee for Culture and Education. So a very important post and a very important actor in this field as well, very focused on digital agenda issues, of course. Also joining me from online is Croatia's Minister for Culture and Media, Nina Obeljan-Korzinek, and more than 25 years of experience in culture and media. Now, before we start this conversation, I am delighted to say that we have a keynote address by Commissioner Thierry Breton, who manages most of the important files when it comes to the rights of creators and rules in the digital markets, digital single market. So let's hear now from Commissioner Breton.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank GESAC, the Federation of European Publishers, and the European Movement International for organizing this event. I also would like to thank my friend Christian Ehler, who co-hosts this event and with whom we share the passion for culture, creative industries, and entrepreneurship. Cultural and creative industries are a key industrial ecosystem. Its importance goes well beyond its economic contribution. This ecosystem shapes our values, our identity, our vision of the society, all that, let's say, define us, Europeans. The pandemic has highlighted the vulnerabilities of this ecosystem, from an increased competition with online platforms to a large loss of revenues. But I also see a multitude of opportunities, particularly with the digital transformation. And this is why my strategy is structured around three pillars: modern rules to support the creative sector, financing to help it recover, and an enabling framework to help transform it. First, we are organizing our informational space in Europe. I know you voiced many times the issue of platforms' responsibility. We have already adopted the Copyright Directive and the Audiovisual Directive. I follow closely their implementation in all member states, so these new rules can deliver benefits on the ground. And only a few days ago, we also hit a landmark in digital regulation. In less than a year, EU member states agreed a joint position on our proposal for the DSA and DMA. The European Parliament is also moving fast, and I'm really hoping for a final agreement during the upcoming French presidency. There is no culture without artistic freedom, and no media pluralism without editorial freedom. We'll propose a Media Freedom Act in 2022 to ensure the integrity and independence of the EU media market and provide a more secure, trustworthy, and transparent media environment. Second, we must support the entire ecosystem to get through this crisis and also transform itself. I welcome that several member states have responded to the Commission call and included creative industries as a priority in the national recovery plans. It is the case, for instance, of Spain with the Audiovisual Hub and of France with the Plan Filière Cinéma. The Creative Europe programme is one of the key funding sources at EU level for creative industry. Its new budget of almost 2.5 billion represents an increase of over 80%. This is not only a sign of its relevance in supporting recovery, but also a recognition of its success in instilling collaboration and innovation at the European level. I want to go even further. Equity investment is key to make the cultural and creative industries financially robust. We'll soon launch Media Invest, an innovative investment platform which can leverage up to 400 million euros of investment in the production and distribution of content and audiovisual companies. Finally, transformation and innovation are key for ensuring the resilience of European culture. By 2030, data, cloud, and advanced digital technologies such as virtual reality will drive industrial and societal innovation, creating new business models. I want European creative and cultural companies to seize all these opportunities. Data analysis for audience development, for production, and for distribution of creative content are fundamental in reshaping the cultural and creative ecosystem. We are already working on media, language, or cultural heritage data spaces. We will also launch a virtual reality industry coalition involving industry across sectors, technology providers, and creatives. So to conclude, I strongly believe that if we want culture to shine beyond national borders, we need to think Europe. We need to work together, capitalizing on our cultural diversity and taking advantage of the internal market. This is my main message today. Artists, creators, and creative companies, no matter which country they come from, should consider Europe as their natural playground for their creative production and distribution activities. And of course, you can count on the Commission's full support to make it happen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton, as well. Important message there, of course, about using Europe, working across Europe, thinking European when it comes to culture and the creative industries as well. Thank you very much indeed. Now let's start the panel discussion, and I'm going to turn to you first, Sabine Verheyen. You've heard Commissioner Breton as well talking about upcoming initiatives and ideas, directives that are up and coming as well. You have a very important place, of course, as chair of the Culture Committee at the European Parliament. What, from your point of view, are the key issues that need to be addressed in the coming months and years? Please unmute yourself. I think this is a word I keep using.
Now you can
unmute yourself.
Now you
Welcome.
can hear me. Okay, fine.
Welcome.
I'm happy to be here, yes. The Parliament has adopted already several resolutions and positions on the recovery of the European culture, trying to help the sector by adopting specific policies and recommendations, and maybe in the short term, most important, asking the member states to allocate and dedicate money from the recovery fund towards culture and creative sectors and industries. In particular, the resolution on cultural recovery, in which we recognize culture as an important part of the European economy. Like also Christian Ehler already said, it's not just the societal part, the pure culture aspect, but also the economical aspect we have to take into account. And the culture is also a mirror of our values. And we call on the Commission and the member states to earmark, according to their specific needs, at least 2% of the recovery and resilience facility dedicated to the recovery to the culture and creative sector and industries. To be honest, we didn't get that through into the legal framework for the recovery fund, but we insist always on the Commission to take care that when the member states set up their implementation plans for the recovery fund, that there is also money taken for the sector. And we have different approaches in different countries, and that makes it in total a success, because we have more than 2% allocated to the cultural sectors, meanwhile, out of this, but not in every European member state equally. In addition to that, the proper and swift implementation of the Copyright Directive, in particular Article 17, that sets the rules for the liability of online content, sharing devices to appropriately remunerate creators, is also a very important aspect for the recovery, because we need economical environment for creators that really respects the intellectual property rights and an adequate and fair remuneration. In addition, platform services still try to weaken the provisions of the directive at national transposition, but the national legislators should keep their position firm and not deviate from the word and spirit of the directive. And I think that's very important. Also, that the Commission keeps an eye on the implementation of the intellectual property right directive so that it is done in a proper and adequate way. The next step that is taken is the Digital Services Act, and currently it's discussed in the lead committee. We have already made a clear positioning from the Culture Committee, but to be honest, the discussions on this file is not as easy as I hope that it would be, especially when it comes to the specificities for the cultural sector. And although really crucial issues have been addressed in the Copyright Directive, the DSA is still a very critical piece of legislation. It will regulate the rules applicable to platforms for the next 20 years. And also in the digital world, we must ensure that the basic principles of the social market economy remain valid. And the biggest platforms have become bigger and bigger in recent years without getting really better. And it has started with big and strong promises to bring more responsibility and accountability for the concerned platforms who have so far failed to do the right things on their own in absence of any legal obligation. And in my view, the legislative proposal for the Digital Services Act is an important step towards regulating online content at European level. In particular to ensure online safety and the protection of fundamental rights in the digital environment. But we have to take care that the balance is right also for the cultural and creative sector and also for the media sector. Media service providers are strictly regulated already at both union and national level via the AVMSD and media regulations, and must adhere to professional editorial standards regardless of how their content and service are consumed. It is therefore essential to protect editorial independence in the media sector, and that is not overruled by house rules of big platforms. And I think that is one of the points we have still to fight on. However, we see that this ambition is already weakened in several aspects in the Council position adopted a few weeks ago. And I wish more of the points we adopted in the CULT opinion were reflected in the compromise text to be voted in the next week. For the creative industry, it is crucial to achieve protection online through the DSA. We as CULT committee are still working for strong liability provisions, stay down obligations, broader know your business customer rules, and ensuring the respect of basic due diligence obligations. And at a time when so many parts of the industry are badly affected by the effects of the global pandemic, it is more important than ever to protect content, to expect the rule of law, and to apply equally to the online and offline world. Infringements of intellectual property rights further drain the audiovisual sector's growth and jobs, while undermining consumers' trust in the online ecosystem, as well as damaging overall economic growth. And emerging issues in online media environment that require rebalancing have also been identified in recent reports of the EP, such as algorithmic transparency of online streaming services. That's also important, especially for the music sector, which content is recommended to users, both in music and audiovisual field, how to better ensure prominence and discoverability of European works on the music and AV streaming platforms, and also the growing coercive practices of non-EU-based major services on individual creators preparing content for their services. We have asked the Commission to investigate this issue and ensure fair remuneration of creators by preventing so-called buyout or work for hire contracts imposed on European creators by such platforms by using non-EU laws. We also noted the crucial role played by author societies in this respect for the protection of the rights of creators. So a lot is to be done, a lot is already done, but we have to keep an eye that the rights and the economic environment for the creative sector is a stable and valid one also in the next years.
Very much, Sabine Verheyen. Indeed, a lot of work ahead, and also, of course, all these emerging issues that have to be dealt with as well as existing issues. So thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview. And let me turn now to you, Minister. You know, we've talked a lot about the digital transformation, and I was just wondering from your point of view, the role of culture, the place of culture in this digital transformation that we are, you know, we've accelerated our speed on that, and we're in the midst of a very, very, very drastic digital transformation, aren't we?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for GESAC for inviting me to be part of this panel. Thank you for an inspiring introduction by Vice President and MEP Mrs. Verheyen. Yes, much has been said already in this panel and also in the previous panels. This crisis, the pandemic, has even speeded up what was already happening so fast. So the digital transformation was happening in front of our eyes, and then with the pandemic, it has speeded not only those who have been looking at digital as their business models, but also the others in the culture sector were forced to go digital in order not to lose contact with their audiences. So as always, this has had both positive and negative effects and consequences, and we as policymakers have to look at both. So not to be positive and optimistic about what good it can bring, but also very vigilant about negative aspects, especially with regard to the preservation of diversity, media diversity, cultural diversity, and of course, in particular, the status of the artists who are being the most vulnerable in these battles between the platforms and the producers very often. We are looking, and we have to look at the digital transformation as something bringing really many opportunities. We also have to look at the overall prospects, in particular highlighted by this commission with regard to green and digital and all the opportunities that it brings to our sector. I'm glad that both Vice President Breton and Mrs. Verheyen were talking about the concept of what we are doing in all different EU institutions with regard to policy transformations. We have completed two important files at the EU level, the Copyright Directive and Audiovisual Media Directive, and I guess most of the countries have now implemented implemented them in their national legislation, and we are looking into what has been announced now for the Digital Single Act and also the new legislation on media freedom, which is all connected. And I would like to point out here that in Croatia, we have also completed the alignment of the legislation, trying to remain within the principles that we have been advocated together with our artists throughout the process. In particular, looking at the position of the countries that have smaller numbers of audiences and artists, and our specific position within the EU, and then, of course, globally. When we talk about copyright directive and the copyright law, we were particularly focusing on the Article 17, and I would really like to highlight this here, that Croatia is one of the countries that insists that we really stick in our interpretations with what has been agreed upon and with what we think, especially in Article 17, is beneficial for our artists, and that we need to stick to what we have agreed when negotiating the copyright directive. We have very much focused on fair remuneration, especially in the field of music, and are very careful about the limitation of the liability and responsibility of the platforms in this context. I would also like to highlight that regardless if we are talking about digital or analog, we have to speak, and this was one of our priorities, to even deepening and enforcing the moral rights and making very clear as to how to ensure all material rights in the digital format, and collective societies and the role of collecting societies. It is a big challenge in Croatia and in other EU countries, but for us this was very important. I would also like to mention something when we talk about national approaches, referring to what Mrs. Verheyen has said about the national plans for recovery and resilience. In Croatia, we managed to be roughly within 2% of the overall budget of the national plan for recovery and resilience going towards culture. And we have shared this with some specific challenges that we have in Croatia, having been faced with 2 big earthquakes and the damages in cultural heritage, but the segment earmarked for culture and creative sectors, we have shared it between creative industries and media, focusing in particular in the field of media on fact-checking, which we see as an important contribution for media pluralism, and in creative industries really focusing on the recovery.
Thank you, Minister. The sound is just becoming not very good. I was wondering, are you towards the end of your comments?
Yes, if the sound is not good, then I'm at the end of my comments.
No, it's just that it's been fluctuating throughout. It's not very, very good, but I don't want to interrupt you if you have a final.
No, it's okay. Comment. It's okay. Go ahead.
But thank you very much indeed for what you've said. I think these are very important points that I'm sure Veronique will be able to comment on as well. So Veronique, we've talked about rebalancing, and we've talked about how we've very quickly had to convert our lives into digital lives. But you've brought up the topic of rebalancing, because of course the digital single market in Europe is not yet complete. It has inequalities. It's not really across Europe as it should be. So this idea of rebalancing, how does that fit in with recover and restart?
Thank you, Shada. May I first say 2 words about our initiative, Rebuilding Europe with Culture, because I think it's important to recall that this initiative is coming from a simple fact, the fact that cultural and creative sector, as confirmed by recent figures, are one of the heavyweight in European economy, at the heart of European social fabric, and could well become the #1 ally for the recovery of Europe if enough support, financial support, and if appropriate policies are put in place. And I would like also to say that our role in that is to highlight the needs of the sector and to make sure it is given the place it deserves. Our role is a little bit one of a watchdog, and we would like to follow up until the needed funds would finally actually reach the sector and the creators, and that the EU policy action are taken at European level. I would like also to emphasize the fact that it is a collective effort. and that it's not only GESAC, but a lot of organizations have joined together to send joint letters asking for 2% of the recovery to be given to this sector. I've also supported the EY studies that is on the basis of all those figures and this rebuilding campaign. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank them very warmly. There is also a complementary initiative going on that I would like to mention, such as the Cultural Deal Europe from our friends from Culture Action Europe and our other organization. And I think that Culture Action Europe is also going to issue tomorrow an interesting document, a mapping of culture in the different resilient plans. And Culture Action Europe is also going to organize an important event on the 1st of February. We'll be there. So yes, coming back to the core of the issue about the rebalancing, I think that it was made clear today that there are several cumulative, indispensable conditions for the sector to recover. First, the reopening of cultural venues under safe sanitary conditions and rules. Second, the allocation of enough financial support for the sector to recover and to further growth. And then, yes, third, the rebalancing of power within the digital market through a solid legal framework. And this is because CCI, the cultural and creative industries, have fueled from the beginning a large number of business in the internet and is now part of a very important part of internet use, even more than online shopping or social networking. But the digital market, which is dominated, as we all know, by tech giants and by big platforms, poses serious problems of inequalities, unfairness, and coercive practices. So we need to look at that. And it has been underlined by predecessor speakers very eloquently. There are three ways forward on that at European level. The first element is to ask for a swift and faithful implementation of the Copyright Directive adopted in 2019. It's a very important piece of legislation, and especially Article 17, which ensure fair remuneration by big platforms such as YouTube to creators. All member states should now transpose without any further delay this text and resist from the pressure from online platforms, which are still trying to water down at national level rules that has been adopted democratically at European level. The second key decision and legislation that should be done is to adopt a meaningful framework for platform under the so-called DSA. We have talked, Commissioner Breton talk about that, and several speakers, including MEP Verheyen, who has been very active on this. The European Parliament will vote soon on that, and it will be followed by final negotiation through the trilogue, so-called trilogue. But the recent evolution of the text are not reassuring at all. And we would like to hope and urge the legislator to make the final changes in the text so that not to deviate from the initial objective of the text, which is to create more accountability on platforms and a safer and more trustworthy online environment. And the third point I would like to underline is there is a need also to look carefully to the growing streaming market. It has also been underlined this evening by MEP Verheyen. The music and the VOD streaming services have become one of the main ways for people to enjoy creative works, which is fine, and it is good to see that there is a growth potential for these markets. But for them to be fair and sustainable, they also need to deliver and to generate sufficient values for the creators, which is not the case today. there are at least two issues to be mentioned on this regard. As regard VOD services, there is the problem of the so-called buyout contracts imposed by non-EU platforms to creators, depriving them to benefit from the potential success of their works. This should not be possible within the European internal market. Second, when it comes to the music streaming services, this blooming service market should now also deliver revenues for songwriters, for composers, and not only, as it is mainly the case today, for a tech investor, for shareholders, or for those generating data and advertisement revenues from online creative works. Those problems are not totally new, and they are not created by the COVID-19 crisis, but the COVID-19 crisis made it more urgent for them to be addressed since there is more dependence to the online sector and to the digital.
Right, so words are not enough. A lot of work still has to be done. So that's why the rebalancing, the legal framework is so important. We're coming towards the end of our very fascinating, and I have to say very instructive and educational conversations. Let me just turn to you, Sabine Verheyen, and also to the Minister for a very, very short kind of look ahead. Maybe in a minute, if you could, Ms. Verheyen, tell us about what you think you will be able to accomplish in the coming months in this very, very crucial times, and also to you, Minister Korzinek, also just very quickly what you see as the main concern as we move forward. In fact, we're talking about giving hope to the cultural sector. Ms. Verheyen first, please.
So I hope that the voice of the Cult Committee is heard in the lead IMCO committee when finalizing the drafts for the Digital Services Act, and that especially the aspects that are relevant for the cultural sector, like fair remuneration questions and platform, the fairness of platforms are implemented in this legislation also in a way that it respects the results we got out of the copyright directive, and that we find a fair and responsible legislation for big platforms, because that will help to create a fair environment for creators, for musicians, for authors, for all those who are delivering a great work in the creative sectors.
Being fair. Thank you very much, Member of European Parliament, Sabine Verheyen. Let's turn to you, Minister Nina Korzinek, if you, for a very quick kind of wrap up of what you think lies ahead, what you would like to see lie ahead.
Well, I think that the fact that technology is getting faster and faster in its transformation makes us, or forces us as policymakers, to be much faster in bringing decisions. What I see as the most important things in the coming months and years, it is certainly the Digital Services Act, which is currently on the table, and that is going to regulate the rules applicable to tech giants for a longer period of time. And it is important to adopt it quickly to bring more responsibility and accountability for the platforms. This is crucial for culture and creative sector. I think that we also have to look and be ready to deal with all emerging issues, algorithmic transparency of online streaming services, both in music and audiovisual fields, prominence and ensuring the spaces for European works online, look for the balance in platforms, the copyright that we have mentioned, continue exchanging among the member states of all the obstacles that we might find nationally in implementing the directives. And also for us policymakers, I would say, remain in contact with artists and their organizations, because they are the ones who are always, through their requests, setting the agenda for the policymakers. And we need
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed as well. Thank you very much. Veronique, so you've been here throughout this wonderful 2 hours. We've had inspirational speeches, we've heard promises. We've also heard about the challenges and the uncertainties that lie ahead. What is your wrap up before we give the floor to the French Minister of Culture for her concluding remarks? That's Roselyne Bachelot-Naquin, who will be speaking after you. So your takeaways, please.
Well, thank you very much, Shada. If I have 1 minute, I would like first to warmly thank all speakers today. Our friends, Jean-Michel Jarre, of course, the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli, commissioners that deliver a keynote speech, the representative, the current presidency of the European Union and the future presidency of the European Union, the Mayor of Warsaw and the representative of member states, of the European Parliament and of the cultural sector. I think and I hope that this very useful and timely discussion will also be a commitment, a strong political commitment on which we can build all together. I would like also to thank very quickly but warmly GESAC members that provided material for the campaign and also made sure that ensure the assistance of some of the speakers today. It has been said during the afternoon, the role of a collective management organization that we represent within GESAC. They have been key during this pandemic because they had the role of safety net for the most vulnerable authors. They deployed emergency funds for them. And despite the difficulties and the closure of venues, they managed to roll out significant revenues for the authors, even though we know that it will continue. So in doing so, the author societies minimized a little bit the impact of the pandemic and demonstrate that their structure, which is based on collective management and on solidarity, is fit for times of difficulties. I would like also to say that it is encouraging, even though we know that the impact of the pandemic will continue during the coming months and years, and that probably creators will suffer in income declines also for the coming months and years. It is encouraging to see that the sector, the CCI sector, also shown strength, ability to adapt and to innovate. And if it was possible to end on a positive note, I would like to say that this discussion today is encouraging because we have seen key European national and local decision makers on our side with a general understanding that the sector is key for the EU economy, that financial support is needed. And we have seen that the Commission and the European Union has put this on the table, and that with the adequate policy, we can rebuild the sector and we can rebuild Europe with culture. So as GESAC, we'll continue, we will follow up and be sure that we will be there to monitor this exercise together with those who want to help also on that. Thank you, Shada.
And thank you very much, Veronique. And on that, good luck. And in fact, indeed, there has been a very encouraging consensus on the need to work together to rebuild Europe with culture. So thank you also to all the panelists who've joined in. Thank you to Veronique and her team at GESAC. And thank you to you, all online participants as well. From me, Shada Islam in Brussels, this is goodbye, take care, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Together, let's rebuild Europe with culture.
Rebuilding Europe with culture. Where do we stand? Join to find out what they say.
Elle est surtout indispensable pour notre société car elle incarne nos valeurs de diversité, d'unité et de démocratie.
Together, let's rebuild Europe with culture.
We need the European and national decision makers to all be on the same page.
If we are to preserve culture, we must continue to create, to support and sustain.
Culture is essential for our people's well-being and for the future generations of Europeans.
Together, let's rebuild Europe with culture.
C'est tous ensemble, reconstruisons l'Europe par la culture.
Soyons mobilisés pour que le domaine de la culture ne soit pas sacrifié plus que ça n'a été le cas ces 2 dernières années.
We are optimistic that this crisis, like many others, eventually has to come to its end.